Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Rich,
I'm Rob.
and today we're talking about, continuing to talk about World War II. If you haven't caught on yet, this month is about World War II, and if you haven't caught on to the fact that Alex is not here, time to get with the program. Alex isn't here. He's not coming back. He is. He is. Yeah, Rob. I don't know if I told you this, but you're now the
Yeah. I'm just a stand-in. I know what I am. It's fine.
No. You are a lot more than a stand-in. Believe me. If you haven't checked out earlier episodes this week, we're testing out a new format this month where we're launching the content just bit by bit. We've talked about a lot, and we've talked about Memoir 44, which is a great board game. It's a turn-based strategy game, tactical movement World War II. It's a great game, so check it out. And we talked about stories of World War II. We've talked about the effects, long-term effects of World War II. And I think today we're gonna dive into what makes it so memorable. Why do we resonate so much with it? We're just gonna play around with really what it is that really kind of draws us back to this story. And Rob said it really well. It's still fresh. It still feels like it's alive to us, and we want to kind of figure out, just kind of play around with a conversation about why that is. So, why do you think, Rob? Why do you think that World War II is it? Why do you think it feels like the story, right?
I feel like we're going to talk about a lot. I think we're going to deconstruct a lot of feelings here about why we feel it's relevant. But I just want to start with like the gamer's opinion. I mean, there's a lot of tactics there. Yeah. Right. There's a lot of things that could have gone differently. There's a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of luck involved, but also a lot of strategy. And with everything that happened during the war, actually like lives at stake, things, right? Yeah. And so I think from a gamer's perspective, it's fun to reenact that, right? It's fun to dive into that and put yourself in the headspace and say, what would I have done, or what could have been done differently, and what would the outcome have been? So I mean, I just kind of pulled a couple fun. I'm not going to call them World War II specifically, although this one definitely is. Yeah. But you've got war games is this whole thing, right? Yeah. Because we like to play with these tactics. Mm-hmm. And so I think World War II provided a global setting for us as gamers. Board games to say, hey, we have this whole thing that happened in reality that we can now play with, right? Have fun with.
And it's calling war a game is it seems a little, I don't know, insensitive maybe, but it really is. I mean, when you really think about it, I mean, it's just strategy, and there is a game that is played, honestly. And some of the stories we shared where there's like this deception that's involved, and there's this, it's not the right word for what war is, but it is. It's basically just a large scale game. And even in the military, when we practice for war scenarios or battle scenarios, we called it wargaming, and it is what it is. It's you're strategizing, and you're playing a role, and you're trying to figure out, like, how would I respond to this. So I think from a gaming perspective, it makes perfect sense. It's Axis and Allies is a great great example, just because it's, it puts you, and it's so unique because it puts you in the position where you could play as one of the Axis powers. And you're kind of thinking from their perspective, and you're kind of getting behind their motivations and stuff like that too. It's interesting, and it's almost, I don't use that word, I don't use it very confidently, but it's almost educational, right? It feels like it's giving you it's diving deeper into something that really impacted the world and impacted it hard, you know,
Yeah.
back in the 1940s. So
There's
yeah,
there's a limit. There's a limit to that though. Like
yeah,
the games we play are tactical.
yeah,
They're strategy.
yeah,
Right? They're if you were to actually, you said get in the mind of some of these other players.
yeah,
It's like if we were to actually get in the mind and play the politics or maybe
yeah.
some of the religious things or whatever you want to call it, right? The
Right,
cultural things that were going on in these people's heads, we wouldn't want to go there.
right, right,
And
right. You're right.
so it's like it's interesting because we play it at this level,
Mm-hmm.
but deeper than that, we just leave it alone. Like
Right.
we don't want to go there.
Yeah. There's a certain level that we're willing to accept, and another level that we don't want to touch. Yeah. For good reason. I mean, we've talked about it in previous episodes. I mean, we're not glossing over the fact that World War II was probably one of them. I mean, we're talking about, from my understanding, 60 million deaths, the largest death toll of any war. And not to mention the human rights, civil rights atrocities that happened during the war. So we're not glossing over that. But I mean, from a gaming perspective, it's very interesting. And for me, it's really this concept that you have the ultimate bad guy, guy. And I mean, and it's so hard to look at. Man, I'm treading lightly. It's so hard to look at Hitler as anything positive, right? because there's nothing positive about him. Honestly. But if anything, we kind of have this living. This isn't Darth Vader. This isn't Sauron from Lord of the Rings. This is a real life person who had a real life villainous goal, right? And it's so. And the thing about story, the thing about narrative is, if you're gonna pick up a book and read it, or if you're gonna if you're going to watch a movie, you have to identify with the threat that's happening. You have to identify with the peril that the person is in. And I think what World War II did is it gave us this very visceral, very visceral antagonist, right? That we could all universally say, we don't want this, and this is the line, like this is where we will not cross. And and spawning from that, you get there's a reason there's every other Indiana Jones movie is against the Nazis, and there's a reason that Marvel is fighting against the Nazis. There's a reason that you see it over and over and over again as the go-to bad guy, because they really kind of laid that
it's an easy target.
They laid that foundation for this is the worst thing that anybody that we've really done, at least in what we would consider modern day civilization. So you're right, though, with gaming, from a gaming perspective, we enjoy the strategy, but you're right, we're not going any further than that.
That's the other thing I think that fascinates us with World War II, and you're hitting the nail on the head, is the fact that we were able, and Americans are a good example. This wasn't a threat to American soil. This was not. It became a threat to American soil. It initially was not a threat to American soil,
which is why it took so long for us to get involved.
Right, but ultimately, this was bad enough that millions of people, half the world over, decided to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's huge in telling the story, because it wasn't just like a local conflict. It wasn't
right.
It started that way, and it got bigger and bigger, and people picked sides. But it was so divisive that countries from all over the world felt the need to pick a side and get involved.
Right. It was polarizing. You were either dramatically a Nazi, right, or you were dramatically anti-Nazi, right? It was like this fascism, anti-fascism type of mindset that was going on at the time.
I think that definitely contributes to why it's still relevant, because it was, it was huge, right? And it was so polarizing that you picked a side, and it was right or wrong. And there's even stories of people thinking they were on the right side all along, and near the end of the war or after the war are saying, no, I didn't know what I was signing up for, or
didn't know what was going on, really.
Right. Yeah.
Or, I mean, that itself is kind of,
it's controversial.
Not to get into it, it is controversial, and I'm not gonna gloss over it and just plant a universal statement on top of it. But there are people who, I believe, probably were supporting but didn't know exactly the atrocities that were happening. I also believe there are people who claim that they didn't know but did. So it goes both ways. And we've already hit on it. The scale of it is obviously what's so intriguing about it too. The next closest war, and this is according to Wikipedia, the next closest death toll is 3 kingdoms, 36 million.
3 kingdoms?
3 kingdoms. So it's the period of 3 kingdoms refers to the period between the foundation of the state of WEI, W-E-I, and the conquest of the state of Wu by the Jin dynasty in 280. The earlier unofficial part of the period from 184 to 220 was marked by chaotic infighting between warlords in various parts of China. It has something to do with the end of the Han dynasty. We're talking about this is 220 after Christ was born.
So that's
almost 2,000 years.
Yeah.
None of us have experienced anything as traumatic and impactful as far as just annihilation almost. That again might not be the right word, but 60 million World War II. The next closest thing is back in 220. We had 36 million. Was the next largest death toll that was so that it's out of this world numbers, and hopefully numbers we never get to see again. But yeah, I think the scale of it really, along with the narrative aspect, the antagonist aspect, is what makes it so memorable. And speaking narratively, and Alex and I are both kind of storytellers. We like story. We're both working on our own kind of creative projects. Any good villain, and this is just speaking fictionally, any fiction, right? Any good villain has what we call goons, right? So, or I guess there's another term for them called mooks. And Rob knows about this because we were in the fantasy football league together. And every year I changed my fantasy football team to different types of mooks or goons. From a famous villain. So you have a whole bunch of them, and it's not really something you realize until you really think about it. You know, Lord of the Rings, you have goblins, you have orcs. Star Wars, you have the stormtroopers. There's plenty of others. Wizard of Oz, you had flying monkeys. Harry Potter, you have the Death Eaters. There's all these. Any good villain has goons that carry out all the bad things for that villain, right? And I feel like, you know, Nazi Germany just fits so perfectly into that formula, right? You have the villain and you have all these goons that you can really kind of, you know, make as evil as you want, or give them any type of characters. That's why I honestly feel like movies like, you know, Inglourious Bastards, or like in, you know, Indiana Jones, we already talked about that, but any other movie that kind of sets itself within this World War II setting is just so perfectly situated to have that narrative structure of, here's the bad guy, here's the goons, you know, and here's, you know, and I just feel like that plays a huge role as well. That not only that we have the ultimate bad guy, but we have the ultimate goons as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I enjoy watching shows, like TV shows that are like, I'm thinking of like Vikings, The Last Kingdom, these shows that are prior to recorded history, right?
Right.
And war in those times, you know, it was clan driven, local, you know, like, and it even going back to the other war you're talking about in China, you know, it's a lot of infighting, right?
Yeah.
And over years, and you're right. This is the one where it's like, almost from nowhere. It wasn't from nowhere. There's a backstory here,
right?
But in 2 decades, this person comes to power with his goons, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't, kind of for the first time in modern history, it's not infighting, it's not political, it's not religious, it's not necessarily, it's infighting, it's just one bad guy and his goons.
Yeah.
Right? And now it's just mission set, right?
Yeah.
Go get the goons.
And I mean, we talked about the scale of the war itself, but the scale of the goal of Nazi Germany and of Hitler, like Hitler's goal was all of Europe, obviously, but
Yep.
in general, I mean, I think it's safe to say that he wanted to be a world dominator, right?
Yep.
And yeah, the scale of just that, like, can you imagine? Like, Germany isn't that big. like like when you look at Germany on a map, you look at, I mean, Europe, and as Americans, I feel like we often have this misperception of European countries, right? Like, our country is huge geographically, yes. Right?
Germany is like a state.
Right, exactly. Our country geographically is very, very large, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about, I mean, I haven't pulled the numbers for the population back in the day. A very small population that are basically declaring war on the world as it was back in the day, you know?
Yeah.
The scale of the ambition, the scale of, just like, and especially once Russia got involved, like, and we started developing, Italy, and once you get like these Axis powers and allied powers, and there's this polarizing, clash, right?
Yeah.
It's so interesting to think that, somebody thought that was obtainable.
Right.
It seems so like, it's like something that Megamind would think of, like, Will Ferrell. Like, it's like we kind of make fun of this kind of like villainous type of mindset where, like, I'm going to take over the world, Pinky in the Brain, like these, like, it's almost comedic, but to think that there was at least at some point in a very near past a person who believed that they could accomplish this,
it's comedic to a point, right? Like, and I shouldn't say
you're right. Yeah.
Comedic is not necessarily maybe the best word, but it is comedic to a point.
Mm-hmm.
And at which point that, like, it became something.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how does this, like, and it, in retrospect, right? Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
How do you let this guy become the guy he was? But at the same time, we also now have instant access to news around the world, right? Yeah. And this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this episode. It's like, if you control the media, and the media is kind of slow, it's printed media, or it's not word of mouth.
Yeah.
In a controlled environment, you can let this fester, and it can become something a lot bigger than what you think it could become, or at least what we imagine it could become today, because today's, I mean, kudos to today's journalists and stuff around the world, but they don't let this stuff happen. They just, they're all over it, and they broadcast this stuff around the world.
Right. You just saying that made me think of something. 1938, there was this phenomenon. People thought America was being invaded by Martians. And it was it was an invention. The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
Yes.
And it's hard for us, and I'm assuming you're a millennial watching this, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm speaking to you directly at this point. As a millennial, I know it's hard to kind of comprehend that a radio show that's trying to be entertaining accidentally convinced thousands, maybe millions, I don't know, thousands of people at least, that America was being invaded by Martians. And if you don't know what we're talking about, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but look up the H.G. Wells War of the Worlds. It's important to know, I feel like, because it kind of speaks to this idea of propaganda and how easy it was to really kind of set your own agenda, really in a with a nation, especially when we're talking about a nation like we've discussed, that's not very large.
I mean, today we'd call it false news, right? We call it false news
fake
every
news.
day.
Yeah,
Fake news.
yeah.
Thank you. So the link there between then and today is we have this. I mean, all the let's just pick QAnon. Whether you believe it or not, QAnon is this thing that has become something in a relatively short amount of time because of personalized news feeds.
Yeah,
I'll call it that.
Yeah.
Right. And when you personalize your news feed, that's one thing. But back in 1940s, 1930s, even going back to the First World War, you didn't even get to personalize it. You just consumed what was printed, right?
Yeah, you only had really one or two ways to really verify if something was real. Yeah, apart from being there yourself.
Yeah,
it is hard to kind of imagine that world where you're relying on the radio really for a lot. Really, all of your information, all of your entertainment, or most of your entertainment at least. The amount of freedom we have today with being able to double, triple, quadruple, sometimes more than that, check what we're reading and what we're looking into, and we can validate things pretty quickly. You don't have that back in the time that we're talking about in the 1940s and World War II. So, I think part of the reason that it's so memorable is because of that as well, because we've come so far technology wise where it's it's hard to believe that somebody or a political movement or anything like that can actually get to the level that was at. I'm not going to say it can't happen, but it's hard to believe that it can happen again. At least to that scale.
One of the other reasons, and we talked about it last episode, but I think it's worth mentioning again because I think there's a lot of probably people our age, a little bit older, a little bit younger, that this has impacted. The war is recent because our families tell us stories of the war. It's still something that's very alive in our families' histories, right? And whether you immigrated to the United States because of the war, or your family fought in the war, or our great uncle, worked on wartime activities that weren't, front lines.
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff is still really embedded in people's family identities. I think, too. So, give it a couple more generations, and I think some of those things probably disappear, sadly. But it becomes less fresh, and the stories kind of get lost in families. So I think doing what we're doing here is really, I think it's cool to honor the people that stood up to this evil and that did what they did and answered the call. And I hope that people that pick up these games can remember not only it's fun to play the games, but it's also
it's a celebration.
There's history there. There's history there, right? And if you play the game, try and at least refresh your memory on some of those things, because there's lessons in humanity.
Don't play it blindly. Understand, and that's really, and when we were choosing games for this conversation, we bounced around games like Axis and Allies and Risk and other games. We landed on Memoir 44, at least in my eyes, because it does such a great job of it does something it really didn't need to do. It could have just made up fake scenarios, right?
Yes.
It could have easily kind of sold you on this, like, kind of like Call of Duty, and I'm speaking outside of my expertise. I'm always speaking outside of my expertise, but I'm speaking outside of my expertise with Call of Duty. My understanding of like Call of Duty and the other video games or anything like that deals with World War II, they're kind of sending you on these fake missions, right? And you're not really doing anything that might have happened in reality. What Memoir 44 does is they really do kind of put you in these situations that they historically have happened, and it kind of forces you to kind of imagine what it's like. There's one scenario specifically that actually has you put units in your hand. You hold your hand over the board, and you drop the units onto the board to represent paratrooping. And what happened with airborne didn't exist before World War II. I feel like that's common knowledge, but if you didn't know that, the airborne units were built during. All you got to do is watch Band of Brothers to understand this.
Yep.
Band of Brothers does a great job of following these guys, airborne infantry, and how they became, utilized, and how they were utilized in World War II. Some of these drops that they did weren't very accurate, and they're doing it in horrible conditions. If you get out of the plane alive, right, you're landing somewhere where you weren't anticipating on landing. So Memoir 44, in that situation, you're holding your hand out over the board and you're dropping, and you want your units to land in a specific place, right, so that you can have the advantage. Something as simple as that, you're realizing like how little control really some of these guys had over really dire situations. Yeah. And I think, in whether or not that was on purpose, I feel like it was for Days of Wonder, but whether or not it was, I feel Memoir 44 does such a great job of really kind of getting you into this mindset and being historically accurate, maybe as best as they could, and really kind of admiring, that process.
It tells the story too. I mean, mm-hmm. in the scenarios, it says this is what was going on, and we alluded to that back in episode 1, or the first episode of this series. But I mean, Axis and Allies touches on that, but then it just kind of like sets you free, right?
Lets you go.
And, and there's other war games that touch on that, and then it lets you go.
Yeah.
But Memoir does a very good job of saying, this is what you got. Like, these are the micro decisions that were being made by people during battles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it does a good job of setting that stuff up.
Yeah. Woo! What a great conversation. I feel like we handled it well. I'm it is kind of it's so weird because World War II is so mainstream now. Like, everybody knows World War II. I mean, it's been lampooned, it's been made fun of, it's been, obviously it's been the center of a lot of dramatic narratives as well. It's such an interesting conversation, but at the same time, it is a very it does need to be handled the right way. And I like that you and I can navigate that with respect, and also with intrigue and with humor. I hopefully if you're listening or watching, hopefully you've gotten a lot out of it too, that something that isn't really presented in the movies, or maybe in a book, or anything like that, or like on a documentary or something. I like looking at it through the lens of two millennials that are grateful for the experiences that or for the sacrifices that have been made from our grandfathers and grandfathers of others, but also just kind of reflecting on it, and seeing the bigger picture of what it has led to in our current lives. So good conversation, Rob.
You too, bro. Thanks for the invite. I'm happy to co-host, and I hope that I hope Alex's family is doing well.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? We could. I mean, by the time this airs, Alex he should be at least a father. So pray. Yeah. So congratulations, Alex. We're so happy for you. We're looking forward to having you back, and we hope you enjoyed the new format. Let us know honestly what you feel. We're really just kind of testing it out, seeing how it works, and thanks to Rob for kind of being the guinea pig for it. So let us know what you think. Again, we're going to release the full episode as well, so that those of you who enjoy listening for the full hour and a half, or however long.
This is a long one.
Yeah, it's long. But for those of you who like listening for the whole thing, we're gonna add that too. So just wait for that to come out. We'll try to have it up for you by the end of the week. But yeah, let us know what you think about the format. Again, like, subscribe, guys. Please subscribe if you like the content. It helps us out a lot. Rob, thanks again for filling in, for being such a great conversationalist, and for being a good bro. And shout out to Urban Artifact, Operation Plow, Operation Plowshare. Such a cool story. Take a look at Operation Plowshare. It's such. Obviously, it didn't come to fruition, and I think we can be thankful for that. Rob, what was yours again?
One I'm ending the episode on is a Maduro Brown Ale. Maduro is down in Tampa, Florida. They do a good job.
Nice.
Cigar City Brewing, I'm sorry. They do a great job down there. So
Cigar City
fantastic.
Brewing. Good. Yep. All right. And we can see Purdue Pete now. Hold him up. There you go. There's Purdue Pete. Shout out to Lafayette, Indiana, all you Boilermakers that are watching us from Lafayette, Indiana, all 5 of you. We appreciate watching and listening. Boiler up. All right, I did it.
You did it.
I've done chirp chirp a couple times. I'll do boiler up as well. All right, that's fine. All right. Well, that's the episode for you guys. That's the episode for the month as well. Next month, who knows what we'll be talking about, but hopefully we'll be posting up next week with that. But until next time, guys,
be happy,
brew hoppy, and game on.
Game on.
Cheers, Rob.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. During the editing process, it just kind of hit me that the best way to close this out is just to say thank you to all the servicemen and women. Obviously, not just to those that served in World War II, but those that continue to serve, those that have served since then. Obviously, everybody, thank you for your service. I hope everybody's staying safe during this pandemic. People like you, obviously, that help us be able to do what we do. And I understand just a little bit about the type of sacrifice that takes, and I respect that a great deal. So best way to close this out was just to say thank you to everybody, and thank you for watching. Alex is going to be back next week, really. We're going to be starting off March with a new series about baseball. So tune in next week for Alex and I. We'll be back together, and we'll be talking about baseball. All right, we'll see you guys soon.